Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, it's the Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you're getting sort of value or entertainment out of these videos, all I ask that you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Before we jump into the video, as is typical at the beginning of each and every month, the Saretsky Report is now available. So there's going to be a link to that below in the description. It's essentially a comprehensive report on the Vancouver housing market with my sort of wider ranging thoughts on the economy and the Canadian housing market in general, tying all that together, credit markets, etc. So you can get that for free below. I want to touch more so on the Vancouver housing market in this week's video, obviously with the numbers coming out, but in next week or two I'll do a video on the Canadian real estate market as a whole. Primarily because, as we've seen with some of the numbers coming out, we get the national numbers on the 15th of every month, and then it takes me a couple days to sort of dissect them and analyze them. But just preliminarily looking at what is happening in the Canadian housing market, we'll jump into this again further down the road. But we look at Vancouver home sales. 33-year low, worst March since 1986. For home sales, I think the numbers ultimately speak for themselves. Edmonton, fewest home sales since 1990. Toronto, fewest home sales since 2009. So, these are just really just egregious numbers. At a time when really the economy, and you look at it, still actually looks good on the surface anyways, at least to, mainstream bank economists, and people just looking at the economy broadly. You still have basically a 43-year low in unemployment. So to see home prices in a lot of these major urban cities, major urban metros, scraping 20-30-year lows, really is just startling. And so, you have an entire generation that hasn't witnessed this kind of weak housing activity. Obviously it's just been pretty much a 20-year bull market. So anyways, we'll get into more of that later, but I think there's obviously, again, like when we say each housing market is local, well, credit markets are certainly not local. And so that's why we'll tie that all in together later. But I want to jump back to Vancouver. You had the fewest home sales in March since 1986. It was a 33-year low across all property types, whether you're looking at a detached home, condo, etc. Obviously, certain segments worse than others. But it's just interesting to see the media, pick up on it. That was the headline that was read. Of course, I sort of leaked a tweet earlier on April the 1st saying that, showing the chart showing that it was in fact going to be reported later this week that we would have a 33-year low in home sales. So I think maybe the board couldn't sort of sweep that one under the rug. So obviously, as soon as the board reports it, then becomes like official news, and then the media headlines, they run with it. So curious to see how that obviously plays on the psyche. But again, if you've been watching these videos or if you've been reading the previous reports that I've been putting out, there was actually not really newsworthy, to be honest. The 33-year low in home sales. It was actually a 34-year low in home sales in February. It just didn't get reported due to technicalities. And it's been a similar trend for the detached housing market. You've had 25, 30-year lows in detached home sales for going on about eight or 9 months now. But it just hasn't been reported on. So now I think that clearly the numbers have gotten so rotten that it's really just become impossible to really try to disguise. And so, we just dissect these a little bit further. So we have the 33-year low in Vancouver home sales. This is across Greater Vancouver. So if we want to look at Greater Vancouver as a whole, look at the condo market. Everyone's, hey, the condo market's still strong though, right? That's a lot of the rebuttal that I'm still getting. But if you look at it, the Greater Vancouver condo sales actually had a 18-year low in March. So condos aren't faring any better. It's just the detached home sales are really weak, and the condos, of course, are catching up, because that's all relative. As the detached home prices come down, it just really doesn't make as much sense to start paying $1 million for a 2-bedroom condo, and that's why we're seeing. So if you look at the detached housing market, the official MLS benchmark, which again is a lagging indicator, on a year-over-year basis, it's now down to just over 11% year-over-year in March, still trending lower. Same thing for condos. I believe I have the city of Vancouver numbers. I think it shows 7.5. But if you look at Greater Vancouver as a whole, we'll stick with that mantra. It's about 5 or 6% decline on a year-over-year basis. But you can really see what I'm looking for is the rate of change. What is the rate of change in home prices? Because home prices are, again, the prices are just a lagging indicator. So what you want to do is really look at the sales volumes first. Sales volumes dry up. Like, obviously, if you have a 33-year low in home sales, like, that's putting downwards pressure on prices. Like, it should be common sense. But generally, what you see is volumes sort of lag prices by about 2 years. So the prices, as you can see in the rate of change, have really been adjusting quite dramatically. You had the sharp run up in prices, a little dip after the foreign buyers tax, another sharp run up in 2017, and now you can see clear deceleration to the downside. So yeah, I mean, again, ultimately, I think the numbers speak for themselves. In the condo market, the inventory continues to double on a year-over-year basis, coming off of record lows, of course. So that should be taken into context. But I look at the condo market, and I just think that there's a lot of inventory coming. You still have 40,000 units under construction. You still have another, I think, 25,000 some odd housing starts. These guys are working at a frantic pace to try to work through this product. And so I think that there's a lot more supply coming onto the market at, of course, as we know, this is typical of housing cycles, at really the worst possible time. And the supply is coming whether we like it, want it, need it. It's coming regardless. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, like, as I've said before, the prices differ at each area. I mean, if you're going to buy a luxury house in, say, West Vancouver, those are down 40%, 40% from their peak values. It really is like the epicenter of the, I would say, housing bust, at least in that particular area. I mean, record low sales, down 40%. I mean, if that isn't one, then I don't really know what one would be quantified as. Richmond's probably down about 30%, maybe 35% from their peak. That's for detached. And then you go to, like, detached, further out in the suburbs, it might only be a 12% correction. And I think that's more so just a lag. It's going to play catch up. But obviously, we know that luxury homes get hit the hardest. In the condo segment, pretty cut and dry. I would say prices are down 12 to 15% from their peak. So if you look at, like, I live in Vancouver. That's mainly where I focus. If you look at, like, downtown Vancouver condos, they're going for about $1,000 a square foot now. That's really what they're going for. And at the peak, they were going for about $1,150 a foot. So they've really inched lower to about $1,000 a foot now. You're seeing some under $1,000 a foot, depends on, of course, the age of the building, etc. But I don't want to get too micro. But I find that the thing that fascinates me is, like, you're seeing this evolve, and you're saying, 33-year low in home sales. Like, why is this not getting more attention? Like, why are not, like, people always ask me, like, Steve, like, doesn't really seem like people are, like, panicking, they don't really understand it, like, what is it? And I think the main thing is, like, people don't really understand why this is happening. And so, just to give you, like, an example, and like I speak with a lot of developers and people in the real estate space, and like, bless their heart, I just, like, they really, like, they understand real estate, but they don't really understand, like, monetary policy and, like, global macro, like, finance. Like, it's just like supply and demand. That's it. Like, and, like, population growth. That's what they focus on. So, like, all you have to do is, like, look at Bob Rennie's recent economic report. Now, whether you like Bob or not is irrelevant. I actually have a lot of respect for what he's done in the business world in terms of his success. Like, there's no denying that he's obviously a successful person, and I can certainly respect that. I don't have to respect, everything else or whatever. You don't have to like him or dislike him, but you have to respect that he's been very successful. And people always turn to him as like, this guy is sort of the holy gospel of Vancouver real estate. So I was reading his recent economic report and the speech that he gave to his brokerage. And it all just focused on demographics. It just said immigration is X, 30,000 people are moving here every year, and then in the next couple of years it's going to jump to 46,000. And I said, well, how do you go from 30,000 to 46,000? You're basically just using like a linear projection off some random immigration targets. You can't, like, it's not just simple to forecast immigration projections. Like Trudeau might have this immigration mandate, but you can clearly see politics is and the social friction is moving more and more towards anti-immigration. That's just the reality of the situation. That's not a Canada thing. That's like a global movement. Is towards closed borders, nationalism, protectionist policies. So the fact that you think you're just going to like ramp up immigration to these hypothetical numbers, and not only that, but immigration. If you look at it, there's a lot of IMF and research reports on it, but immigration actually fluctuates depending on the strength and the health of the economy. So if you go into a recession or a slower period of economic growth, which I think Canada is certainly leaning in that direction, immigration will slow off significantly because the immigrants come here for jobs. And so if there's very little job growth and wage growth because you're in a recession, they don't come here. And Ray Dalio's written tremendously a lot about this, really good pieces that he puts together. But the thing that I'm basically trying to summarize is I find it interesting because I've never once heard of Bob Rennie or their economists ever talk about credit growth. They've never once talked about residential mortgage credit growth, which is on a year-over-year pace, growing at its weakest pace in 18 years. They've never once talked about household credit growth, which on an annualized basis is the weakest it's been since the 1980s. Those are like your two main drivers of home prices is the ability to take on a mortgage and borrow the money. So if your credit growth is slumping to 20-year lows, the writing's on the wall. And if you actually look into it, credit growth actually leads home prices. There's actually a very close relationship between the two, and that's a lot of the work that Steve Keen's done, Professor Richard Werner, and a lot of people in the finance space that are outside of the real estate industry. So I think it just differs on what moves home prices, but these guys continue to beat over the head immigration and nice place to live, but which I agree, of course it is, but there becomes a point, as you can see in Manhattan, where you're actually getting outflows because the home prices become so expensive, the taxation becomes so high that people are moving. Like in the U.S., people are moving to states where there's no income tax. There's no state income tax to pay, and they're moving to these places, that have affordable housing, decent job and wage growth, and very low tax rate. Because what's happening is basically the middle class is getting squeezed. The wealth is going to the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. And everybody else is kind of falling behind. And a lot of that has to do with sort of the monetary policies that we've engaged through quantitative easing, the massive rise in asset prices over the last decade. So this middle class is shrinking and they're getting squeezed. So they're having to leave these very expensive cities with high home prices, higher taxes. So it's very interesting. I think we just differ on that. But again, we're just getting back to this is the last thing I'll touch on, is all you have to do is look at, so one of the leading indicators, of course, as I've talked about, is household credit. So that's growing at its slowest annualized pace since the 1980s. So it shouldn't be a coincidence that home sales are basically 1980 lows across a good portion of Canada. But you also have look at M1 growth. So that's basically your money supply, right? So people don't understand is and 99% of people probably don't understand this, is like how money is actually created is it's not central banks. Central banks don't just like print money. What happens is they just set the rate of interest for commercial banks to borrow money. So a commercial bank, i.e. CIBC, RBC, TD, these guys create the money supply by issuing new loans. So basically, when you go to RBC and you request a mortgage, they're basically just typing on their keypad in their keyboard and creating basically a deposit, aka your mortgage. And that's how they create new money supply. So the fact that you can see, when residential mortgage credit growth slows to like 20-year lows, and then you coincidentally see your money supply, which is your M1 growth, slowly decelerating. That has massive knock-on effects on the economy because we are living in a credit-based economy, where like fiat money, i.e. like your $20 bill in your wallet, like that only makes up 2% of the actual money supply. So like over 95% of the actual money supply is just like credit. It's just numbers like in the internet. And that is created by commercial banks. So basically what I'm trying to say is all you have to do to watch the future strength of the economy and of real estate is just watch credit growth and then simultaneously watch the M1 growth. As you can see, is like M1 growth is basically a signal that your money supply is not growing. So in a boom, your money supply will grow rapidly. You'll be issuing a lot of new mortgages and a lot of new residential mortgages. The prices go up, so you're basically creating new money. So you have all this like new money like in the system, which obviously makes everybody wealthier, at least during the time being. And then as your money supply the growth starts to decelerate, you're almost making like people like poorer. Right? There's just not enough credit growth to drive future growth and future consumption. So you can see that in retail spending. There's a strong correlation there. As the M1 starts to slow, the retail spending starts to slow. And again, we've talked about mortgage credit. It's a similar thing with home prices. So that's really all I got this week. I don't want to make this video too much longer, but that is what it is. We'll do some more videos on that in the future. But interesting to see Vancouver home sales officially being reported, 33-year lows. But we can see that again, just see that on a national level, that this is happening not just in Vancouver, but in multiple housing markets. Like clearly there's a lot more to it going on behind the scenes. Yes, there's been a huge withdrawal of Chinese capital, taxes. I think that's all played a significant role as well. But that also curbed the demand, i.e. the desire to borrow money. Right? So that's why it's not necessarily critical that interest rates come down. It has to come from a desire, because banks create money basically out of thin air. There has to be a desire from the banks to lend the money, but simultaneously, on the other side, there has to be a desire to borrow the money. And so right now, there isn't a desire to borrow the money because people are psychologically nervous about entering the housing market. So again, it's like you could lower the mortgage rate by 20-30 basis points as we're seeing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be stimulative. All you have to do is look at Japan, look at Europe. They've been running negative interest rates for some of them 10 to 20 years, and there's just no stimulative impact there. So anyways, that's all I got to say. I hope this video helped. Otherwise,